So the way that I think about the path to 245 is Apple's basically got to wean itself off of its dependence on the smartphone, which was 60% of their sales in the last fiscal year. And if you think about a lot of their announcements yesterday, content, advertising, payments, this is the path to moving away from that dependence on the iPhone. So I do think this is the big opportunity for Apple. And as it pertains to Apple TV Plus, I think there are still a lot of questions to be answered. And yesterday's event was akin to going to a iPhone rollout and leaving without knowing what the price is of the iPhone.
Right.
So highly unusual.
And that's why a lot of Wall Street reaction was a little bit of a yawn, Tom. You said it's a path to 245. Is it a bridge to nowhere? You know, in a sense, Apple is such a strong company for the iPhone and the device, market around that. Now this is kind of spreading a little bit of money into a lot of different categories. Would Steve Jobs, you think, say, yeah, this is the way you got to go to compete in this day and age? Or are they thinking too hard about how to try to stay relevant?
So Steve Jobs, clearly his strategy was to focus on fewer items in general, being very selective about what they were going to pursue. When I think about their content, their proprietary content offering, I think this shows you the structural challenges of the long lead times for video content. First, you have to sign the talent, and in that regard, they've done incredibly well. You think of Oprah Winfrey and Steven Spielberg, then you have to make the product, then you have to market the product. So I think that they clearly had this date on the calendar for huge announcements, and the content's not there yet. And it does open some questions to what it'll ultimately look like.
Julia, one thing that they do seem ready to market and that stood out to me was an emphasis on privacy and what they're not going to do with respect to sharing consumer behavior with advertisers.
Tyler, that's absolutely right. We heard Tim Cook take a couple of subtle digs at Facebook. Of course, he didn't mention Facebook by name, but he did say when he was talking about the Apple News Plus product that they would not be tracking what you're reading and ads would not follow you around the web, because this was going to be a different kind of product when it came to consumer data and consumer privacy. They referenced privacy when talking about the Apple Card, the credit card that they're working on in partnership with Goldman Sachs and MasterCard. Their point being here that Apple takes privacy very seriously, and they're going to be very careful to protect consumer data, trying to put Apple in contrast to what Facebook has gone through in the past year or so.
Tom, does Apple have a real choice here? What would it look like if they didn't try to pursue this whole services aspect and just settled for being the world's one of the world's best smartphone makers? Sure.
So I think Apple, in that scenario, when you look at the stagnation in growth for what is a mature premium smartphone market, they would look like a very slow-growing firm, but still wildly profitable, generating a lot of free cash flow. So I do think it's important. But the points they just made on privacy, I think, are incredibly important. We went to the event thinking there'd be pressure on Netflix. I think that's still to come. We left the event expecting there to be pressure on Facebook and Google, because they're clearly not pursuing the same path on advertising and privacy that Apple's doing, which I think is playing to their strengths.